Hi everyone, bonjour à tous. My name is Isabelle Leroux and I'm the president of the Federation of the Alliance Française USA. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this event organized by René Ketcham, chair of the Cultural Offering Committee of the Federation, Melissa Sora, our national program manager, and myself. The topic we will discuss tonight is how to decide where to live in France with Adrian Leeds. Before introducing Adrian, let me tell you a few words about the Federation of the Alliance Française USA. We are the largest Alliance Française network in the world, as we represent 105 Alliance Françaises in the US only. There is always an Alliance Française close to you where you can learn French and enjoy an amazing French cultural program. You can find all the information regarding our network on our website, afusa.org. On our website, you can also discover all our upcoming events. So we have an amazing program for February. We will start by L'Art Nouveau, and the curator, Antoinette Martin, is really the expert. So I invite you to join us on February 9. On February 14, we will celebrate Valentine's Day, and we will learn how to do financier with amazing chef Alain Lenôtre. We will have an event on February 21st in French, fully in French, as we will talk about iconic author Françoise Sagan. And the secret of mastering French or back is going to be in two parts. So if you want to learn French, improve your French, join us, and it will be live on Bonjour Paris. It's not for today, but if you want to mark your calendar, it's on March 30th, and it's another amazing program, and we will talk about Picasso, and it's all about the book of author Cohen Solal. So you can see it's an extraordinary program that is waiting for you. So now it's in terms of logistic and format, let me tell you a few words. So please stay on mute and on speaker view, that's the best. If you have questions, put your question in the chat. If you're facing technical issues and that you lost the connection, you just have to log in back and use the same original Zoom link. The event is being recorded for our YouTube channel, and the full program is 1 hour. Now it's time for me to introduce Adrian Leeds. Adrian, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's not the first time that we work together, and it's really an honor to welcome you.
Well, thank you, Isabelle.
You live in France for over 20, we said no, it's more than 23 years, it's almost 30 years. You're a GTV personality regular on House Hunters International, and you will present your group, Adrian Leeds Group. You're the expert in real estate in France, especially in France. It's your turn, Adrian.
It's my turn. Thank you, Isabelle and Melissa, so much for another wonderful webinar with the Federation of the Alliance Française. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. And today I'd like to talk about how to decide where to live in France, which is a question I get on almost a daily basis. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, let's see. I can share my screen, and here we go. And let me go back to the beginning. There we go. And I have to get rid of this little box at the top. Perfect. So can you see my screen? Yep.
Yeah, we can see it, Adrian. Merci.
Okay, great. So how to decide where to live in France? As I said, this is a question I get on almost a daily basis. And as I was telling you guys earlier, I might be bursting a few bubbles here, but that's the risk that I'm about to take. First of all, I just want to go through a little bit of who we are and why we are. We are a licensed real estate agency in France, but we are primarily property consultants, and we work for the buyer more than for the seller, because we will list properties, but the properties we list are only properties that we would actually recommend our clients buy. So we're very particular about those particular properties. So we offer property consultation and search. We can help someone in either a purchase or a sale, something we call sales or purchase assistance. We do appraisals, we provide financing resources, and we have resources for renovation and decoration. Basically, we're sort of soup to nuts, and can do absolutely anything related to property and assisting someone in strategizing how to make their move from 0 to 100. Now, the reason that we actually exist is because there's no multiple listing service in France. In the US, with a multiple listing service, it means that you can actually go to any agent or agency and they will have access to all properties at the same time, which is not true in France. In order to find property here, you really have to talk to each individual agency that has a small bouquet of properties, because they don't want to share in their commissions or this information. And the process here is very, very different than it is in the States or in Canada. The laws are different, the language is different, you're dealing in a different currency, you've got cultural differences, just about everything. So our goal is to assist someone in finding a property, whether it's to purchase or to rent, getting them installed and situated in that property, renovated if necessary, and really from beginning to end, and making a smooth and easy transition, acting as a liaison. We provide all the resources. I mean, it's a full service situation. Now, we probably all know what the benefits of living in France are. I'm just going to go over these briefly because maybe it'll strike some chords, but I will tell you that if and when you do make the move to France, if you spend any real time here, you will not go back. I'm sure I can hear some giggles out there. But I can tell you that I came on a 1-year sort of sabbatical in 1994, and here I am 28 and a half years later, and there's no way that I'm ever turning around and going back, because, once you make the move and you develop a life and you make friends and you realize the advantages of this lifestyle, it really is pretty difficult to give up. I mean, what we have is incredible beauty, architecture, landscape, fabulous style, amazing culture, culinary arts, performing arts, creative arts. We're steeped in culture. There's a tremendous amount of diversity within this one country. It's pretty amazing that in a geography that is the size of Texas, there is so much available in just France alone. And France is the center of Europe, and that makes it a great place to travel from. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go along. The lifestyle is, completely different because this is a place where you work to live, not live to work. And there is a joie de vivre. There's plenty of time to relax, reflect, and enjoy yourself and your family. And that's a big selling point. On top of it all, there's a big safety net here. So you've got really excellent and inexpensive health care. You've got employment and retirement benefits. So these are things that, we just didn't have, or I certainly didn't have growing up in the United States. Education is amazing here. If you've got kids, you've got a very high quality free educational system for both children and adults all the way through college. And then there is this infrastructure, which provides excellent transportation systems, sophisticated, inexpensive communication systems. It's very well designed and well run and inexpensive. And these are not the only things, because on top of it all, sure, some of the taxes are higher, but some of the taxes are lower. And the bottom line is that you get a lot more for your money. You have fewer rich, fewer poor, and a much larger middle class because France offers that bigger safety net. And one thing I want to make note of is that when you move to France, if you are retired and you have retirement income or investments, you are not taxed in France on that retirement income or those investments, which is a big plus for retirees. And after you move here, 90 days after, you are entitled to apply for Puma, which is putting you on the French healthcare system, which will pay up to 70% of your healthcare costs, which are about 1/10 of what they cost in the United States. And for those who don't know this, but the WHO ranks France as the #1 best healthcare in the world. So these are huge benefits of living here. Now, there's a lot of France to love. We all know that, and that's why this is such a difficult decision. Let's face it. Paris is the primary destination for most Americans. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more a little later. But it is an urban lifestyle, and it has the highest cost of living, mostly because the property is so expensive in Paris. After that, Nice and the entire Riviera offers both an urban and a suburban lifestyle, and the cost of living is more moderate because property along the Riviera is about half the cost of Paris. So that makes it, much more affordable. If you go into Provence, which is also highly desirable by the American community, you have a more rural lifestyle, but you also have a moderate cost of living. If you go into other cities and the provinces in France, you will find a combination of urban and suburban and rural. There's an awful lot that it offers, and a much lower cost of living. And I've divided this up this way because this is what I've seen as the pockets where most Americans tend to land. And as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Now, there are 18 administrative regions in France, 5 of which are overseas. One is Corsica, which is the island off the southeast coast. In 2016, there were 22 regions, but they were combined to administratively handle just these 13 to make it more efficient, and some of the names slightly changed. So that's what the map looks like these days. So where do you want to live? Now, this is my list of criteria. Your list might be a little bit different, but this is what I think is most important. I honestly believe that it's really important to be somehow in a thriving American community. And I know that an awful lot of people say to me, but I'm not coming to be with other Americans. I just want to, fit into a French lifestyle and the French community. Well, the truth is that the American community in France is not like the American community in the States. These are Americans who are Francophiles and love France. So they're very different than the average American that you're used to being, associating with. Unless, of course, you're, attending the Alliance Française and you're surrounded by other Francophiles all the time. But the idea is that you have a very easy way of making friends because you're going to meet people who are just like you. These are birds of a feather. You'll have a lot in common. It's wonderful to make these friends quick and easy. And not only that, but you're going to need them to commiserate with, because when you make this cultural transition over, it's not very easy. And if you don't have these American friends to talk to, you're going to maybe feel a bit isolated. So I find this is, for me, it's #1. #2 on my list is fast and easy access to transportation. This is your opportunity to get to know not only France, but all of Europe. And if you are near an international airport, have a good TGV hub, you've got good local transportation, it means that you can really get around and do an awful lot of things, the things you couldn't do before. So I think it's really high on the list. Next is climate. Where are you most comfortable? Do you want to be in the sunny, warm South, or do you prefer a cooler, damper climate? And I think this is very important to consider when you're thinking about where in France you want to live. After that, urban, rural, Do you want to be in an apartment or a house or a village house, the middle of the countryside? The bottom line question on this is whether you want to have a car and drive, have a car at your disposal, or no car at all. I have been in France for 28 years without owning or operating a car, with the exception of renting a car from time to time. And I have to tell you that that is a burden that's been lifted off my shoulders, and I enjoy it very, very much, especially as I get older. I don't necessarily want to have the responsibility of a car, which is actually something that's, dangerous and time consuming and expensive. AAA will tell you that the average cost of car ownership in the United States is close to $11,000 a year. That's a lot of money that I can save, a lot of money I can put towards taxis or Ubers or renting a car or traveling all over Europe. So this is a big question. Do you want to own and operate a car or not? Okay, after that, let's look at the cost of living. So it really depends on what you can afford and whether you're going to rent or purchase. Then hospitals, healthcare. If you're my age and older, you might want to make sure that you've got access to good healthcare in hospitals, that you don't want to be so far away from the nearest doctor. So that's something to consider. Language, how good is your French? If your French is really good, then you can be in the middle of nowhere where they don't speak any English and be fine. But if you're just starting out, you might want to be somewhere where you're going to have, enough people who can speak English to you, especially like healthcare professionals and things of that nature, so that you're not feeling really isolated and out of touch or frustrated. Then, of course, do you want business opportunities or do you want cultural activities? Are both of these important or one or the other? But they are definitely things to consider when you want to decide where to live in France. Now, the American community, which I believe is important for your social life and your sanity, is spread out all over France, but they really are Paris-centric. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that these figures are based on the International Statistics Organization, the INSEE. This is what was reported by a publication called The Local. But even they have admitted that they believe this is much lower than the actual number of Americans. We believe there's over 100,000 Americans in France. So they're saying 31,000. So let's just take these numbers and multiply by about 3, because I believe that the ratios are pretty much the same. So you'll see that in the Ile-de-France and in Paris has the overall single largest group of Americans without a doubt. But there are some other parts of France that certainly have an awful big community. The Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes area, which is where Lyon is located, has a very big community. Provence, even though it's a lot smaller than the Occitanie, has a tremendous community, and that number is definitely growing. I've been watching it grow for the last few years, and the Occitanie does have quite a number of Americans as well. So these are places where you're going to be able to communicate, make friends, get along a little bit easier. So the Ile-de-France, of course, is home to most of the Americans. Paris makes up most of that. They don't tend to like the suburbs around the capital. They really want to be in the center where everything is happening. I think that's pretty logical, even though you get a lot more bang for your buck by living in the suburbs. But when you do, you have to know that you're going to be at the mercy of the transportation going in and out, or you're going to need a car. And going in and out of Paris with a car is not that much fun. So Americans are generally drawn to the larger metropolitan areas, and Lyon and the area around it is certainly one of them. Lyon is a beautiful city in central France. It's very similar to Paris in many ways, but smaller. It's very sophisticated, and it's definitely a business center. So a lot of these Americans are in Lyon, not necessarily just to hang out, but because they're working there. And then the Côte d'Azur. You know, it's not very surprising that with a combination of Sun-Sea Mountains and rosé wine, why so many Americans are choosing to live in the sunny South. In fact, interestingly enough, during COVID, 64% of the Parisians who left Paris came to this region, the PACA region, the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region. And it really isn't surprising, especially because in the last 10 years, we've seen a tremendous amount of improvements to the area, thanks to the mayor of Nice, Christian Estrosi, who's very dynamic and has made tremendous improvements to the city. And it's grown up quite a bit. I've watched it grow over the last 10 years. Amazingly, the community is just fantastic. Now, there is a community in the Aquitaine and around Bordeaux. So that's a growing community as well. And there are a few Americans in the Dordogne, but the Dordogne is still primarily inhabited by the British. And then the Occitanie, which used to be the Languedoc-Roussillon, now it's called the Occitanie. And it is also starting to attract a larger group of Americans, but it is still primarily British when it comes to Anglophones. So interestingly enough, the Americans don't go as much into La France profonde as the British do. And I made this little note, and we know why, and I can tell you what my feeling about that is. Basically, the British, who are Europeans, they're in the center of Europe. From London, they can get on an EasyJet or a Ryanair for very little money and travel all over Europe. They don't have a lot of land, and so they come to France for that. They come to France to have wide open spaces, a lot of greenery, fabulous wines, cheeses, and everything that they don't have in England, but they really don't need to make France their base to travel around Europe. They have that. Whereas we as Americans, you know, for us to travel to Europe is going to be an 8+ hour flight. And so if we can make France our home base, it is the center of Europe, and travel all over Europe, it's an enormous plus. In fact, it's really one reason we don't want to leave, because we have access to so much, so easily, so quickly, so inexpensively, by train, by plane, by car. It really makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why Americans tend to stay in more urban areas where they have transportation access, which is one of the things that I think is so important. So now when it comes to climate, there are 5 different climates in France. And you might note that the oceanic climate and the modified oceanic climate, which is really pretty much the left half of the country, can be pretty cold and gray and wet, except for, of course, as you go further south, it does get warmer. The overall temperatures, though, are not hugely different. They're fairly moderate. So it doesn't get really, really cold, and it doesn't get really, really hot, but it can get pretty wet. Now, in the south, in the oceanic climate, you can have some Mistral, very hot winds. You can get some pretty heavy storms. So it can get to extremes. But so you just keep in mind how that climate's going to feel to you. Then with the continental climate, now these are the plains of the Northeast, and Strasbourg, which is one city that I think is a great place to live, does have extreme weather. It does get really cold. It does get really hot. And it's not as moderate as the western side of the country. My favorite is the Mediterranean climate. And that's where I am right this minute in sunny Nice. The Mediterranean climate is, of course, the warmest area of the country. And interestingly enough, as you get closer to the coast, it is a lot cooler in the summers than when you're further inland. So if you're in Provence, it can get really hot in the summer. Whereas if you're in Nice along the coast, or Cannes, or Antibes, or Menton, it's going to be much cooler because you've got the sea breezes. And the Mediterranean is also a warm water, so it's really lovely for swimming. And of course, you've got Mediterranean diet, which is the best diet in the world. And that's just an added plus and has nothing to do with climate, but it's one of the reasons that this is growing by leaps and bounds for the Americans moving over here. Then there's the mountain climate. And of course, you have to know that if you're going to be in the mountains, in the Alps and in the Pyrenees, you're going to have snow and frost and cold. And so but you might be a skier, and that would be a fabulous place to be. So really just depends, and put climate on your list of considerations. So here's the big deal: urban or rural? Do you want to drive a car or not? Now, I know that most Americans are just used to living in a car, that you're living in your bubble. You go from your house to your garage or your carport or your street. You get in your car, you go to your supermarket or your cinema or your restaurant or your friend's house, and then you get back in your car and you go home again, and you live in this bubble, and that's what you're used to doing. But I can tell you that when you move over to a more urban environment, which has really good public transportation, and you no longer need that car, you're going to live a healthier lifestyle because you're going to get a lot more natural exercise walking. You're going to spend a lot less time traveling, means you have more time for yourself. You're going to spend a lot less money. And ultimately, you're going to have a much easier, happier life. Honestly, living without a car is really a blessing. But that means living in a more urban area that has good public transportation. Now, getting a license, which is a big deal for us, because in order to have a French driving license, you have to acquire the license within the first year of your having a visa living here. And you have to take tests, and you have to go through a school, and it's expensive and difficult in French, unless you have a license from one of the 18 reciprocal states. Now, on this slide, I just want to show you this. This is a book written by Joe Start called French License. It's hilariously funny. It's all about getting your French license. If you want to consider doing that, I highly recommend reading this book. And the states that have a reciprocal agreement are this list of 18. And what you can do is you can actually trade in your license from those states for a French driving license. But I'm going to give you one tip. Before you do that, you go tell your DMV that you lost your license, and you let them send you a second copy so that when you hand in your license to the French government, you still have your US license. So when you're back in the US, you don't have to worry about showing them your French license. You can just show them their US license. It's just a little trick we do. Now, if for some reason you are caught driving without a French driving license, there is a pretty hefty fine. It's 800 euros for the first time. And if you're caught a second time, you might have to go to court. I will confess that I do not have a French driving license. I occasionally rent a car, which is no problem because I rent it with my US license. And I take the risk of driving without a French driving license. But as I said, it's a Euro fine, and I'm willing to take the risk. And so far, I've been lucky. Now, when it comes to airports, there are really only 4 fully international airports in France: Paris, Charles de Gaulle, and Paris Orly, Marseille, and Nice. These are the 4 airports where you can fly outside of Europe. So you can fly to the United States and other places around the world from those 4 airports. The other airports, they're listed here as international airports, but basically that's because they fly at least within Europe. And I want you to think about this. This is really important, because if you need to go back and forth to the States or Canada or elsewhere in the world, you may want to be close to one of these airports. Easy access, it makes a huge difference. Sitting here in Nice, I can get on a flight. I can go to Venice for the weekend on EasyJet for 70 euros round trip. And that is a big plus. So this is where I think having access to an international airport is really important. Then there's the TGV, the train à grande vitesse, because the TGV network is just amazing. From Paris, you can travel all over the country on the high-speed train, as well as outside of the country, to over 200 destinations in France and in Europe. And being on any one of these TGV lines is a major plus to getting around all of France and really enjoying your life here. This chart just gives you an idea of how fast the train is. Paris to London, 2 hours, 17 minutes. Amazing. Paris to Marseille is only a little over 3 hours. Now, Paris to Nice is a 6-hour trip, because it generally goes through either Marseille or Avignon or Aix, and it's high speed to one of those cities, and then it takes sort of a slower track between those cities and Nice. I mostly use the train to get to Nice because I like to just relax, plug in. I have Wi-Fi. I get a lot of work done. I can bring as much luggage as I want. It's from the center city to the center city. I don't need to take a taxi to the airport, deal with security, any of those things. So I prefer to take the train, even though it's 6 hours. Meanwhile, Paris to Brussels is only 1 hour and 22 minutes, to Lyon, a little over 2 hours, Bordeaux, a little over 2 hours, and Lille, a little over 1 hour. It's really amazing, and the trains are fantastic, and they generally run on time, and they're very inexpensive. Now, next, once you've decided all that great transportation, you got to look at your budget, like where is property the most expensive, least expensive. This is in order by cost. Paris is at the top. Paris is double anywhere else. And that's just the way it is. So if you can afford to live in Paris and want to live in Paris, then do it, because it really is the center of life in France. After that, though, there are an awful lot of wonderful places that are less expensive. For example, Lyon, Nice, Bordeaux are about half of what it costs in Paris. And then followed with Strasbourg, Nantes, Marseille, Toulouse, Montpellier, and Lille is almost a third of what it costs to live in Paris. So, your budget may dictate, moving out of Paris and into something more reasonable. Now, you can get some bargains in the suburbs around Paris. There's no question about that. But again, it's going to be a really different lifestyle. It's not the same as living in the heart of the city of light, that's for sure. So rents, okay, interestingly enough, this is a chart that you can access by this domain name that I've posted on here at ecology.ch. gouv.fr. And it shows where rents are the most and least expensive. Pretty much rent follows suit with property purchase in terms of price. However, interestingly enough, Paris, even though Paris is double the price when it comes to a purchase, it is not double the rent of other places. In fact, Paris is a very inexpensive rental market by comparison to the cost of the property itself. So when you're looking at this chart, loyer T1 means the rent for a one-room apartment, a studio. Loyer T2 is basically a deux pièces or two-room apartment. And just notice that the price per square meter and the cost of the apartment, for instance, compared to Nice, let's say Paris is 35, almost 36 euros per square meter. Nice is 24 euros per square meter, which is about 2/3 of Paris, but price of property is half. So that'll give you an idea of, how that plays out. And so that'll give you an idea about rents when you're looking at budget. But Patty, in fact, Patty Sadowskis is on this call. She's one of our co-hosts. And I remember a few years ago when she moved to Nîmes, because one of the advantages was that the rents there were very inexpensive. She then, a couple of years ago, moved to Nice, but she can maybe talk about that during our Q&A a little bit, because Nîmes was a lovely place and, again, very inexpensive. Okay, where's your healthcare? Let's look at healthcare. You've got hospitals, large hospital centers all over the country. They are clearly mostly in urban areas. That makes the most amount of sense. That's the map on the left, and the red dots show the regional hospital centers and universities. The map on the right actually shows where you have individual doctors, okay, per 10,000 inhabitants. So the darker areas of the country are where you have the most doctors. And that's, that would be very important. I love this particular map because this was an individual who took it upon himself to determine how you could reach an emergency room in the least amount of time and where those areas are. So, if you need to get to an ER pretty quickly and you want to do it in approximately 20 minutes or less, there are 278 cities that allow that. Okay, but that's only less than 8% of the entire country. So the domain name is there, adventofdata.com. If you want to research this a little bit more, you can see where the blue is how you can get to an emergency room faster. What's paler in yellow and red is longer travel time. Now, I highly advise that you learn some French before you come, so that maybe you don't have to have that Anglophone community so immediately. So the Alliance Française is all over the country. Do tap into their network. It's certainly the best you're going to get, and I highly recommend learning some French before you come. And then I recommend learning French after you arrive. And you've got Alliance Française all over France as well. So you've got a nice big choice of schools, and you can do this online as well. I'm sure that they can talk about this. And if you have any questions, just contact your Alliance Française to learn more. So where are the Anglophones? Not just the Americans, but the Anglophones, meaning the British and the other people who are speaking English as Canadians, Irish, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans. They're all over the country. And just check out the Nouvelle Aquitaine. That includes the Dordogne, but of course, they are mostly British there. The largest area is still the Île-de-France, but the second to that is the Nouvelle Aquitaine. And this will give you an idea of where you can find other Anglophones all over France. Again, these statistics are from the INSEE from 2014. I will make you a bet that the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur has grown since 2014 considerably, because that was actually a long time ago. And things have changed. Okay, bottom line, these are my recommendations for great places to live. If you want it all, Paris has it all, but Paris is urban and expensive. From Paris, you can travel anywhere. You've got a huge American community. You've got a zillion things to do. Culturally, it's the richest spot on the planet. And it's Paris. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. And the only downside, I think, to Paris is actually the weather. After that, I think Nice is number 2. Nice really is nice. You have an international airport. You have easy access to that international airport. You have a great public transportation system. You do not need a car. You've got the best weather in the country. It's half the cost of Paris. You have a very relaxed lifestyle. It has a big international community, and the Riviera is drop dead gorgeous with plenty of things to do. I rank it way up there. After that, I really love Aix. I love Aix-en-Provence. It is a very elegant and beautiful city. It's a small city. It's manageable. It has a big student population. It has easy access to the Marseille airport. So it's about a 30-minute drive. That makes it great. The TGV is 3 hours to Paris and also 3 hours to Nice. So you can go in either direction. And the only downside to Aix is that it can get really hot in the summer. So it's not as cool as Nice in the summer. After that, Provence. Now, Aix is in the middle of Provence. Provence is a very large area. There are different parts of Provence that are fabulous. It's all beautiful. The community is spread out. So this is where you really have to have a car. If you're going to live in the countryside of Provence, you will need a vehicle and you will want to travel to meet up with friends. But it is insanely beautiful. There's plenty of things to do. It's not as expensive. It's about the same cost as Nice. It's a little more expensive than the other provinces, but there's a reason for that. And because it really is a wonder world. Now, interestingly enough, number 5 on my list is the city of Lille, which is kind of a sleeper because interestingly, Lille, which is in the very northern part of France, and it's a cold, wet climate. And culturally, it's very similar to Belgium and architecturally similar to Belgium. But what Lille has going for it is that it has TGV access to Paris and London and Brussels and Amsterdam. And the people who live in Lille tell me that this is a huge advantage, that they can get on a TGV and go to any one of those cities for a day, have a wonderful time in any one of those cities, and also fly out of those cities to anywhere else in the world very easily. So I think Lille is a very interesting choice, especially when you consider that it's about a third the cost of Paris. So it ranks way up there. And after that, the only other city that's on my list is Strasbourg. And the main reason that Strasbourg is on my list is not only because it's really a beautiful city, but because it's a very international city. It has a very international community. At one time, it was the seat of the European Union Parliament. And for that reason, it has a very interesting mix of people. And I think that makes it more interesting than other places. And it's easy access, a little over 2 hours to Paris. So these are my general choices, not necessarily yours, but it's, as I said, it's my opinion on this. And that gives you plenty to think about. And just so that you know what we offer, we have 3 newsletters. I write 3 nouvelles lettres, 3 newsletters a week that you can subscribe to free of charge. You can see us on many House Hunters International episodes. We've done more than 50 episodes. You can attend a coffee gathering that we do on the 2nd Tuesday of every month in Paris, where I always have a guest speaker. They're fun, they're interesting, they're free. So mark your calendar for that. If you want an individual consultation with me or a group consultation, that's the best way to get started. And another thing that you can do is participate in webinars such as this one. We have an upcoming one, which is our quarterly financial forum for the first quarter. It's on March 8th. And if you click on this link, maybe Patty, you can put the link to that in the chat, but you can go onto the website and find it under events. So you might want to participate in that. I do that with Brian Dunhill from Dunhill Financial. Now, just as a final note, we have helped thousands of people make this move. It all starts with a consultation, and that's with me directly. I do believe that no matter what you do, you should get good advice. It really is worth paying professionals to put you on the right path so you're not crowdsourcing or getting bad information, which is really, it's easy when you go online and you see everyone has a comment, but you really don't know who to believe. I do believe in working with professionals. But I don't want you to let fear get in the way of your dreams. And I'd like for you to replace the word expectations with hopes so that you'll never be disappointed. This photo is of a guy named John Garland Jones. He moved to Nice a few years ago. He told me he'd always dreamed of having a singing career, but never pursued it. He's here in Nice. He's singing his heart out, and he's been loving it ever since. So on that note, why don't we open this up to questions? I see we have about 12 minutes or so left. So if you've been putting your questions in the chat, we can go ahead and open this up. Patty Sadowskis will be looking through them and letting me know what you want to learn. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Okay. There we go. So I can see everybody.
And I'm going to stick with a couple location oriented questions. And one question came in about where is the least humid region in France?
The least humid region in France?
Yeah.
No one's ever asked me that.
I know.
I would probably have to say the Riviera. Because the Riviera gets the least amount of rain.
But it's humid here in the summer.
It can be, but I don't.
It can be.
But the question is the least humid.
And probably somewhere in the mountains.
Maybe.
Probably somewhere in the mountains. But the comment I want to add to that is, having lived in Paris and in the south of France, well, and in Nîmes, in Nice and the area, air conditioning is much more common.
Yes, that's right.
I went through many heat waves in Paris and stores in Paris and buses in Paris and metros in Paris during a heat wave, and it is unbearable. In Nice, there's air conditioning. So you can go home and enjoy your air conditioning. The stores, the restaurants, things are tend more to be air conditioned here.
And they also add what's called a brumisateur, which are these
Right.
misters out in the cafes. And so you're absolutely right, Patty. It tends to be cooler overall. And I can remember when it was like 110 degrees in Provence and it was 85 degrees in Nice. So it's really different. Really, really different.
Right. And in Nîmes, I was there this summer when it was 111 degrees without air conditioning.
Right. And that's
I
when I was
mean,
going, okay, come down to Nice. Because
But that's something to think about, because even just going outside was not pleasant.
that's right.
We went, we had to get up early to go to the market, but then after that, all you want to do is be home and, and out of the heat.
Okay. Next
So
question.
those are things to think about. We had another question of why not Bordeaux?
Bordeaux, this is personal. Bordeaux leaves me cold. Bordeaux, because once you're there, there's nothing from there. Once you're in Bordeaux, for you to experience any other part of France or even Europe, you really have to travel back to Paris before you can get around. In order to even get to Nice, for example, you have to travel back to Paris to get to Nice. Now, you can fly, but there's not a lot of flights between those cities. Bordeaux is also a rather closed kind of community, because if you're not part of the wine industry, then they don't really care about you. It's not a very international place, and it's not all that inexpensive. I just personally don't find Bordeaux very interesting.
Okay, we had another question from someone who said they love the mountains and sea. Which area would be best?
Well, the mountains and sea, that's easy. That's the Riviera.
What's the Riviera?
Riviera, because it really goes from a small amount of flat straight up into beautiful hills and beautiful hilltop towns and gorgeous views. Absolutely.
And even from my apartment, well, the view behind me is from my apartment in Nice. And where the sun's setting, there are some mountains in the distance. And in the winter, I can see snow. And when I look the other direction from my apartment, I have a little slice of a sea view.
Well, it's 2 hours from Nice to the Alps.
To go skiing, yeah.
So that's if you like mountains and sea, that's the place to do it.
Perfect location.
Okay.
Perfect location. Okay. We had another question about the Po region.
Oh, that is definitely in the middle of the country. You're there, you're stuck. You're just there. If you want to be stuck in the middle of the country, then be my guest. But again, as I said, I think that you will have a much more wonderful life if you have access to transportation, and you can easily travel, and you can easily meet up with other Anglophones, especially other Americans. The British are Anglophones, but they are not Americans. They will not share your same issues with you. They're very, very different. In fact, I think the British to Americans are more different than Americans to the French, culturally, believe it or not.
Very true. Okay, I'm just looking for some more where to live questions. And this was more of a comment just about, climate change. And that's something to keep in mind too, how the climates of the different regions of France could be changing.
I've certainly seen it over the years. Paris is definitely overall milder. The winters are definitely milder. I know because my geraniums don't die in the winter anymore. They used to. There's no question about that. But with that has come extreme heat, and Paris is not really prepared for the kind of heat that it's been getting.
Right.
So yeah, no. That's definitely a good point. We have to keep that in mind.
Okay, and a question from Melba. My husband and I would love to move to France. Could you provide resources for how we can start planning a future move?
Well, of course, this is what we do. It starts with a consultation with me. I help you strategize the entire plan, organize all of your efforts, and we have all the resources you need to make it happen. So it's pretty simple. It's not complicated. And we do it every day. People do it every day. It's amazing. Getting a visa these days is not difficult at all. And so it's just, it's mechanical. It's just a few hurdles, but not that big a deal. Yeah.
Okay, I was looking for, another real estate question. Okay, a question from Lainey. To start the process of looking at property, would you suggest contacting agents in your desired area or looking on the internet?
Absolutely not. The way this works is, first of all, there's no multiple listing service. You cannot go to one agent and have access to everything. Now, if you work with us or someone like us, then we basically do the legwork for you and put you in touch with the various agents and properties. But because we're a licensed real estate agency, we can bring a client to the agency and we can have a commission share, which never happens in Paris, but can happen about half the time in other parts of the country. And with that commission share, we actually refund that back to you. So it means that you can work with us for very little money, allow us to provide the resources, advise you along the way, and protect you. Because when an agent represents the seller, they're not representing you as the buyer. That means that you're not going to get the full truths from that agent. There are things they might not want to tell you because it would hurt their sale. You have to keep this in mind. Whereas when you're working with a consultant such as us, we've got your back. We want to make sure that you know everything you need to know about that property, so that you're sure to make a good decision. We like to think of it as insurance. So the best thing you can do is have fun surfing the web, enjoy the hell out of looking at all those properties and dreaming, but don't contact the agent directly, because if we do it for you, you have a much better chance of being successful, quite honestly.
Okay, and there's a question from Kimberly. What is the average time frame to make the move from the first strategy meeting with Adrian to making the actual move?
Well, when you get your visa, which takes a few weeks to achieve, then they want you to be in France within 90 days of getting your visa. So if you're planning a move, I would say you want to start at least 3 months in advance to work out the details. That should be plenty.
Oh,
enough.
yeah. I mean, 3 to 6 months is easy to do.
Yeah, easy, very easy.
Mhm.
Now we've got 2 minutes left. So Patty.
Okay,
The
let's
last question,
see.
Patty?
Isabel and
Yes.
Melissa, are there anything we should cover that we haven't?
No, I think that our participants are ready to move. Ready to move to France. So thank you so much, Adrian. It was such a very complete and inspiring presentation. Thank you so much.
It's always
think
my
that-
pleasure. We do have a couple more minutes, though. If there's one
Yeah.
last question we want
Yeah,
to.
if there is a last question, Patty, do you have a last question?
Well, I just ran across an interesting question, but an important question from Andy. Should I bring my furniture or leave it in the States?
That is one of those questions that depends on how much you love your existing furniture, how big and bulky is it, because it might not fit in a small, Paris apartment. How much it will cost for you to ship it over compared to what it will cost to just buy new furniture here. IKEA is a very inexpensive way of furnishing things, but it might not be the quality you want. So you kind of have to weigh all those factors and then come to a conclusion in the end. And maybe just a partial shipment. Maybe it's a half breed, maybe you ship some and you buy the rest, something like that. Yeah. But, bring your personal belongings and your art and things like that, which are not necessarily heavy, that really will make you feel like home. more than furniture. And it's time. So I guess we
Anytime,
have-
yes. Time flies, you know, when we are with you, Adrian. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. And the recording will be available on the Federation YouTube channel. So you can, it will be available in the next few days. What else, Adrian? They can contact you directly?
Right,
Absolutely.
contact us
I'm
directly.
sure they have more questions.
Right, easily. Just email info@adrianleeds.com. Patty gets those emails and then she'll
Mhm.
redirect them. And we are always happy to see you. Very happy to have so many people on this webinar. I'm really
Oh,
pleased.
yes.
And I hope it was helpful because I know it's such a difficult decision to make. There's a lot of France to love. You know, there's really no bad place, okay? That's for sure. It's just that we think there are better places than others. And no matter what you choose, you're going to have a wonderful life here. And my
Exactly.
crystal ball says you're never going back.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you all the
Thank you all.
participants. And I
Great.
hope to see you back.
Thank you, Isabel.
To see you
And
back
the
for
listeners.
another program.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.